Also, because of the pandemic, this online webinar format is new to many of us, since we have not been able to host regular membership meetings or seminars in person here at HACIA. We have been able to quickly pivot, albeit with still some challenges. And so we've been challenged to reimagine and utilize our existing technology to the best of our creative ability. I do want to take an opportunity to thank our sponsors who have contributed to make this morning's presentation possible. So if you give me a second here, we do want to recognize those sponsors. So we want to thank ComEd. We want to thank as our main sponsor, as our gold sponsor, 7D Construction, as our silver sponsor, Truck King Hauling Contractors Incorporated, as our bronze sponsors, the Blackwood Group, Design Bridge, People's Gas, and Solis Construction. And our individual sponsors, Maestros Ventures LLC, Sanchez and Associates, Sandillano and Associates, and Valdez Engineering Company. We really appreciate your support of this event. Now, as we're all aware, the last several weeks have been unprecedented. In fact, 2020 has been unprecedented and historic in many ways, from the outbreak of the pandemic to the massive protests because of the murder of George Floyd, to the rioting and violence that broke out not only here in Chicago, but throughout the country. And this has caused us to stop and reflect on what a unique situation in history we are in and what we can do going forward. As you may have heard me say in the past, at HACIA we have three main pillars. We have membership, we have advocacy, and services that we focus on. And we do that to ensure our mission of bringing equitable participation for our members in the design and construction industry. And for 41 years, we have not wavered from this purpose. In other marketplaces, people use the arts or philanthropy, or even as of recently, investment funds to address issues of race, inclusion, and diversity. And we at HACIA, we've been doing this in order to affect change and open opportunities for Hispanic businesses in the public and private design and construction markets. And we have done so in order to achieve parity, but also we know that by doing so, we can have truly sustainable economic impact in our community. At HACIA, we have maintained a strong track record of providing a membership platform for Hispanic and other minority businesses. Our membership is open to any business. Now, our advocacy efforts and legislative successes have come as a result of our strategic alliances with other organizations. And those include the Federation of Women Contractors, the U.S. Minority Contractors Association, the Black Contractors Owners and Executives, and the Association of Asian American Construction Enterprises. Our efforts are aligned when it comes to issues of diversity and inclusion in the design or construction marketplace. We know that over the past 10 years, new markets have opened up for MWBE businesses. Now, there's been some buzz about this morning's event, and we appreciate it. And some believe that perhaps HACIA should play a bigger role in what is happening throughout the city and the country, or to comment and to have a larger conversation. Now, businesses are having this challenge, and we've seen this escalate over the last 90 days or so. And we believe that by spotlighting the perspectives that these individuals who are on our panel and what they've gone through in their careers in life and in their leadership roles in their businesses, we believe that we can shed some perspective and what we can learn and reflect on. So joining us today in this fantastic lineup are a group of African American and Latino leaders that have shown and demonstrated with impact leadership in their careers. So let me begin by introducing them. First, we have Joe Dominguez, CEO of ComEd. We have Charles Matthews, President and CEO of People's Gas and North Shore Gas. We have Paul Roldan, President and CEO of Hispanic Housing and Tropic Construction. We have Elsie Higginbottom, President and founder of Burling Builders and Chairman of East Lake Management Group. We're honored to have Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia of the 4th Congressional District and Congressman Bobby Rush of the 1st Congressional District. And first start off with a quick little bio on Congressman Garcia. He proudly represents the 4th Congressional District of Illinois. Throughout his career, Congressman Garcia has been a progressive voice, both as an organizer and as a legislator, fighting to improve the lives of his working class neighbors, many of whom are immigrants just like him. He is a coalition builder, committed to expanding access to equality and quality education, affordable housing, and economic opportunity. And he currently serves as a member of the influential Financial Services Committee, Natural Resources Committee, and for us, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. He is also the founder of the Future Transportation Caucus. Congressman Bobby Rush has served the people of Illinois' 1st District for over 2 decades, representing the South Side of Chicago and the Southwest suburbs. Congressman Rush is the 2nd-ranked Democrat on the influential Energy and Commerce Committee, and he chairs its subcommittee on energy. During his time in Congress, Congressman Rush has sponsored and supported countless pieces of legislation aimed at uplifting the most vulnerable members of our society. Mr. Joe Dominguez leads ComEd, an Exelon company which powers the lives of more than 4 million residential and business customers, or 70% of Illinois' population. He is responsible for the safe and reliable delivery of electricity to customers and for empowering them to manage their use. He oversees the management of the electric grid of Chicago and for most of Northern Illinois and ComEd's partnerships with diverse communities it serves. Mr. Charles Matthews was named President and CEO of Peoples Gas and North Shore Gas in June of 2015, and in this role, he oversees the daily operations, strategy, growth, and administrative activities of WEC Energy Group's 2 Illinois utilities that collectively provide natural gas service to nearly 1 million customers in the city of Chicago and 54 communities within the northern suburbs. Mr. Elsie Higginbottom is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin, and he has been involved in the financing, development, and management of residential and commercial real estate for over 50 years. Mr. Higginbottom is the president of Eastlake Management and Development Corp., one of the Midwest's most respected real estate development and management firms. Mr. Paul Roldan is Chief Executive Officer of Hispanic Housing. And Mr. Roldan has developed over 4,500 affordable apartments and townhomes in 56 various developments for families and elderly residents of several Hispanic communities in Chicago. In addition, he has initiated the development of over 82,000 square feet of retail space in several Chicago-based developments. He has also directed the formation of a property management division, which currently manages over 3,900 residential units in various communities throughout Chicago, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Puerto Rico. Mr. Roldan also established and now directs Tropic Construction Corp., a residential and commercial builder. And he's also planning an affordable affordable community energy, a community-based oriented energy services company targeting affordable housing. Previous to his experience with Hispanic housing, Mr. Roldan developed low-income housing in Brooklyn, New York. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Now, this is how we're going to convene this panel. We have a few questions that we've sent to you in advance, and I will ask you those here so we can discuss. And for all of our viewers, if you have questions, we do have a Q&A section here that you can write questions to us, or you can upvote a question that someone else may have posted. Now, we may not get to all of them, but we'll definitely try. And for HACIA members, you can't text me right now questions or quotes. I really appreciate that and appreciate your patience. So we'll start with the brief opening statements. We'll still first go with Congressman Garcia. Congressman Garcia, if you want to just give us a quick 3-5 minute opening statement, we really would appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for the invitation, and of course to all the HACIA members. I appreciate you convening this wonderful panel to help us reflect on our roles and opportunities that we have to make an impact in our communities. It's very important for me as a community member and public servant to create the space and time to engage others, to also effect change and improve the lives of our families. We know that there is immense need in our immigrant and working class communities, and collectively for our families, we can make a difference. As the first Mexican-American in Congress from the Midwest, I do feel a great amount of pride, but also responsibility. in bringing other leaders along from the private, public, and philanthropic sectors, just like yourselves. None of us are here on our own, and it is up to us to hold each other accountable to invest in our next generations and across sectors and nationalities. I look forward to our conversation, and I'm very proud of the role that HACIA is taking in leading the way for economic vitality for our community, and at the same time building coalitions with other similarly situated groups across the country fighting for equity, especially in these very challenging times.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Garcia. Congressman Rush, would you like to say a opening statement as well?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Well, again, I want to thank you, Jorge, for this unique opportunity to appear on this webinar with so many illustrious and accomplished individuals, including my longtime friend, Mr. Elsie Higginbottom, and many, many others. I just want to say that in light of the tragic and evocative murder of George Floyd, we are in a unique position here in America. It is up to you and I and members of HACIA and others to really seize the moment, seize the time, because this is a transformative time in America. But as most of similar times in the past have shown, if we don't take advantage of this time to engage the interest and the active participation of everyday ordinary Americans in trying to reimagine an America without systemic racism, then we will have failed the call of history for our generation. And I think that we are equipped for it, for this very moment. We have, most of us have been able to, we actually grew up, most of us in the civil rights era, the last time that we had opportunities for this kind of change. And I think that what we have to really appreciate from the past is the power of coalition politics and coalition of our efforts. And we have to really be very conscientious about the strategy, the proven strategy in some instances, in far too many instances, of the enemy of freedom, justice, and equality for all Americans, that very enemy that have used the power of division to curtail and stagger and stagnate this movement that we should all embrace for freedom, justice, and equality. So this is a great time for us. This is a great opportunity for us to have this panel and platform discussion, and I look forward to it. Lastly, I must say that in my capacity as the chairman of the subcommittee on energy, I'm very optimistic that energy is really the economic driver for the future economic recovery of the nation. It really rests significantly on the energy sector, both alternative energy and other forms of energy. But the energy sector is the sector that's going to create jobs, create business, and create America's future. So again, I am more than delighted to be on this panel with you and with your other panelists. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Congressman. And speaking of energy, we'll now go to Mr. Dominguez.
Jorge, thanks for having me on this morning, and we're proud at ComEd to sponsor this discussion. It's an important one to have, and I love that you have invited a conversation about the intersection of the tragic events and the issues that those events present to us, and the broader issues of economic equity that we've been dealing with for a number of years and need to continue to move forward. It's a great opportunity to have that. You have a great panel. I'm honored to be a part of that panel. And good morning to all the members. Look forward to a rich discussion. Thanks, Jorge.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Higginbottom?
Thank you, Jorge. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I am truly honored to be part of this discussion today. It's unfortunate that such an unfortunate occurrence had to occur for us to have this discussion. As I reflect back, I reflect on similar discussions that we had probably over 50 years ago. And I think back at that time in the interim, I think we thought that we had put a lot of these things to bed, but obviously not. I am very honored to be with the rest of the panelists that you have here. And I think that your having this discussion really will bring out and continue a discussion to talk about the inequities that are in our system for people of color. And I think that we should continue to have the discussion even as we go down. Generally, what happens, unfortunately, too frequently is that after the emotional period, the level of discussion generally turns down. And I would hope that we can continue to have this kind of vibrant discussion. So I'm proud to be here with all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbottom. Mr. Roldan?
Good morning, Jorge, and thanks for providing me the opportunity to be with, as Bobby said, an illustrious panel of people. You know, my thought about what's going on is that I'm, sort of have been flabbergasted that the American economy, most powerful economy in the world, has been brought to its knees in 4 months. Operating somewhere around 30% of what it was come January of this year. And even though it's been fed $3 trillion or so, from the Fed to sort of keep it on its knees, the sort of community aspect of that, as it hits the ground, as it hits our neighborhoods, is that we have had poor working class and poor people who are the most affected, those that have not had the opportunity like us to be home, carrying out to the extent that we can our businesses, doing work, but staying safe. Those folks have either had to go into their shops, factories, businesses to expose themselves to this problem. And many businesses have closed down, creating an unemployment situation that's virtually unprecedented in this country. So to me, one of the sort of lessons on a neighborhood level that is crucial, I call it the salvation of our entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are really a unique and special breed. They're intelligent, they're organized, they're efficient, they're risk takers, they collaborate, they organize people, and they run businesses that employ community people. Many of those businesses are closed, many will not reopen. And my thought is, I'm glad I have some legislators here in the panel, that we should have a national venture capital fund that targets these very people that have been devastated in their neighborhoods and fund them to resurrect their businesses, to re-employ people, to regenerate capital within that community economy. And that to me is the foundation of us getting back to normalcy, economic normalcy in this country. Let's salvage the entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Roldan. Mr. Matthews? I believe our cameras are
Yes.
working, correct?
Okay, good morning. Good morning, Jorge. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Very good. First of all, thank you, Jorge. Thanks to HACIA for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion this morning. People's Gas and North Shore Gas is extremely proud to sponsor this program and also to be a supporter of HACIA. As my colleagues and the other panelists have already indicated, we are in unprecedented times, and times that all of us should have reflected over the past 2 or 3 months. And as I've reflected over what has happened, I would say that my reflection took me back to my days growing up in Georgia, like my fellow panelist, Congressman Rush, and we joke about that quite often.
Right.
And I go back and I think in 1969, I participated in the freedom of choice, selecting to go to a school as a 12-year-old. And don't you guys start counting my age, because my daddy wanted a better education for me. Eventually, I was part of a forced busing initiative. Fast forward to what has happened over the last 3 or 4 months. I never would have thought that we would still have the fight in front of us as it relates to equity and social justice that we still have. The good news today is I'm sitting in a seat, in a C-suite as the president and CEO. I'm not a 12-year-old going into the 8th grade. So it's quite a different perspective. I will tell you that it allowed me to reflect on all of the sacrifices that were made to allow me to get into the seat that I'm in today, and also reflect on what I need to do personally, as well as the CEO of a corporation, a business, to help provide those opportunities for that next generation of 12-year-olds. So I am extremely fortunate and pleased to be here today and look forward to the discussion. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. And, and that gets us to sort of the first question here. That you talked about your early years. Let's go over to Congressman Garcia. Congressman Garcia, is there anything you could tell us about the early years, kind of your upcoming and sort of just things that reflect on as of late as well? And I believe our camera systems are working now. So.
Yes, we're back with video. Well, let me tell a little bit about my history, and then we'll fast forward to the very tumultuous, challenging, but I think times that are full of opportunity and transformation of our country, even more so. I was born in a very small village in the northern state of Durango. My father moved to the U.S. as part of a worker program that the government contracted Mexican workers. It was known as the Bracero program in the late 40s. He made his way from farms in Texas, California, Kansas, and then came to Chicago. About 1963, he got his green card. He petitioned for us, and we were able to come here in 1965, the year that Congress enacted the Voting Rights Act. And that's very important because that piece of civil rights legislation is part of the reason that I'm in Congress today. So I want to underscore that. Since we arrived in Chicago, we first lived in Pilsen, and later 1969, I moved to a little village where we bought our first home. And I haven't left Little Village since then. So going on 52 years, I think it is, neighborhood resident. I got my first taste of advocacy as a teenager here in the neighborhood, organizing for causes that mattered to neighborhoods, often ignored by citywide officials. I was inspired by a lot of community organizing and hell-raising traditions in Chicago. Congressman Rush knows quite a bit about that. Those early experiences set me on my current path. I've served as a alderman, as a state senator, Cook County commissioner, and it's been very rewarding. But I've also been involved in the nonprofit sector as a leader of community organizations, also in philanthropy. And now this most recent opportunity has taken me to Washington to be a part of a very, very transformative Congress, the 116th, where, we thought it would be exciting just being in the majority in the House of Representatives, but we've dealt with so many issues, government shutdowns, the impeachment process, the onset of the pandemic, but we've also passed very historic and significant legislation that hasn't received more attention because the Senate has killed a lot of it and is sitting on a host of bills. And those bills now number almost 500. So I want to point that out. And I think we're on the cusp of a lot more transformative change in the wake of what has been revealed about America's inequities. The country is living a very significant period where we're re-examining our history. We're looking more closely at the Constitution. We're looking at how we make groups whole that have suffered discrimination and terror and institutional racism for many, many decades. And thus, I think the environment in the country is such that there's potential for us being in a moment where we truly become a more perfect union, seizing on Abraham Lincoln's words, of course. I think that as our speaker has pointed out time and time again in Congress, the times have found us, but the times have also found our country. And now if we want to make it truly a place that is welcoming and appreciative and embracing of everyone who has contributed to our country's greatness and strength, that this is a moment full of challenges that we are facing. The health crisis coupled with the economic crisis that underlines the inequities that have long been ignored are huge challenges. Small businesses, of course, have had to temporarily close. Many laid off employees or cut hours, and people are hurting very much. And as they reopen, businesses are facing new expenses related to cleaning protocols and PPE, and many are not opening up. So this really forces us to think long and hard about the recovery. I'm glad to see Paul Rodin put a challenge on the table about a venture fund, recognizing that small businesses are the heart and soul of many neighborhoods across the country, and recognizing that in African American communities, there's an absence of small businesses. You can only have healthy neighborhoods and safe neighborhoods when you have thriving neighborhood commercial strips. So I look forward to working with him, with our fellow panelists, with HACIA and many other groups in the African American community and the women's movement, because this is a significant moment in our country's history, and I think one that puts us in a position of leadership. But we need to be bold, and we need to be embracing of everyone in our midst.
Thank you, Congressman Garcia. Congressman Rush, would you be able to give us a little insight as well to the early years?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jorge. Again, let me state that the trajectory of my life really began in the rural Southwest Georgia. I was born on a farm in a place called Sylvester, Georgia, a farm that my grandfather, who was a World War I veteran, that he was able to purchase. And my early years were spent in just investigating and searching out and being quizzical about life itself and about my surroundings, and full of love and peace, and living on a farm, living a great agricultural life. My father and my mother left the farm and moved to a place called Albany, Georgia. And that's where I started my public school education from kindergarten up into the second grade, and still a very nurturing, warm, and pleasant environment. But also, I remember from my days in Albany being first introduced to the difference between blacks and whites. We lived on a place, on a street called Residence Avenue in Albany, Georgia. And my uncle lived about about 2 blocks down the street from us. And I recall when we would leave our house and walk down to my uncle's house, we always walked on the side of the street that had no sidewalk, that was next to an open field that was rocky and sometimes muddy. But right across the street was the white side of Residence, and we had white folks living in nice apartments and homes, and they were. I remember them sitting on their outside on their porches and things, watching us, looking at us, and then children playing in the yard as we walked on the unpaved path down the street. And so I guess that's when I first noticed the difference between the life in the black of a black person and the life of a white person. Well, we moved from Georgia to Chicago and settled on the near north side around Division and Orleans, Division and Wells. And that was such again, a nurturing part of my life. I graduated from the Benjamin Franklin Elementary School. And at that time, in my 8th grade graduating class, we had multiracial class, we had multiracial schools. If you notice, at that time, that near north side, I remember as a young paper boy delivering the Chicago American newspaper and others. I remember having on my route going up into apartment buildings where poor Appalachian whites live, where Latinos live, where blacks live, where Asian America live. So it was an amalgam of different nationalities, different races, and indeed different sexual orientations, even back in the 50s and in the 60s. And so that was the underpinning of my world outlook, was being able to work with and to recognize and to appreciate the disparities that that near north side community that it raised me up in. And then, of course, my mother and my father separated, they never divorced. And so my mother began to struggle economically, and we moved around the city from the west side to the south side, from the north side to the west side to the south side. And so, but then I decided, after a very unsuccessful high school career, when I first graduated from grade school, I was at the top of my class at Franklin Elementary School. I had been accepted into Lane Technical High School, which was the preeminent high school in the city at the time. And I decided that I didn't want to go to Lane, and I wanted to go to Crane High School because I wanted to play basketball. And so I went to Crane, didn't do well there. And ultimately I dropped out of high school and went into the military. I volunteered for the Army on December 2nd, 1963, which was a few days after the assassination of President Kennedy. And so I stayed in the Army, and that's when I really began to develop my activist consciousness while I was in the military, because the military at the time was, I was stationed at a Nike missile base on the south side of Chicago, and the Nike missile base that was located in Jackson Park. And even though it was in the middle of an urban community, my commander was a commander from Alabama, and he was a shoulder, stone-hearted, cold-blooded racist, and we clashed a lot. Again, my consciousness was really heightened, and because of what was going on in the South in terms of the civil rights movement, and what was going on, what I began to go even in the northern area in terms of the civil rights movement. And so vivid images of clashes and marches, you know, that really developed my consciousness, my social consciousness, my political consciousness. I was ultimately honorably discharged from the Army in 1968, 2 weeks after Dr. King had been killed. I had been AWOL during that time. I mean, really taking my social consciousness to another level. And from that, even while I was in the service in Chicago, I was able to work closely with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Dr. King's youth organization, and from that became a member of the Panther Party. And after my discharge, a member of the Panther Party, and then was a member of the Panther Party up until 1974. 75, I ran for alderman in the city of Chicago, and then after 9 years as an alderman, I ran for Congress and was able to be elected to Congress. But throughout that, I really, really maintained that really it's important that we create the right kind of sustaining coalition that will help us all to realize the American dream. In the Panther Party, some of you might remember that we were the first organization to ever coin the phrase and organize the Rainbow Coalition. At that time, the Rainbow Coalition consisted of Appalachian whites, an organization called the Young Patriots, which was a group of Appalachian whites, some primarily Puerto Ricans in Chicago by the name of the Young Lords, Cha-Cha Jimenez, and the Panther Party. And this was the first Rainbow Coalition. And so my belief in coalition politics has been embedded for me from my early days in the Panther Party. I just want to end by saying Bobby Seale, the chairman of the Panther Party, used to say that you don't fight racism with racism, you fight racism with racial solidarity. And that's been an approach that I think that bodes well, it bode well in the past, it bodes well now, and the future of our nation really is going to depend on us being able to harness the power of our differences and also our commonalities and form a coalition around our common purposes. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Dominguez, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about sort of your background, your history? I was reading through your bio, very, very impressive, but I think everyone would like to hear a little bit more. I also forgot to mention a big welcome to Chicago. I know you're only a couple years here, but we still need to roll out the welcome wagon to you. So, Mr. Dominguez?
Jorge, and again, good morning to everybody. You know, the common thread in hearing the histories of all these wonderful people Congressman Garcia, Congressman Rush, the little bit of the story that Charles shared is that our worldview is formed very early, and it's formed by the relationship and in many respects we've had with our parents and the life lessons they taught us. For me, my parents came to this country in the early 50s. My dad used to say that he and my mom came here the old-fashioned way, which is to say they came to the country on a visa, they overstayed the visa, and they either got deported or threatened with deportation, and that was their pathway. For my dad, we were in a war at the time in Korea, and one of the ways that you could become a U.S. citizen was to volunteer and go fight for the country, and that's what he did. He and my mom knew each other for about 6 months before he went into basic training, and they got married the day before he went into basic training. In those days, obviously, there were no computers and the paperwork didn't catch up quickly enough. So my mom got deported back to Cuba. My sister and I were born after my dad came back from the war. And we settled in an area called Union City in North Jersey, which is a very diverse area. It was very well known for Latinos that came to this country to go work in the factories in North Jersey, like my mom and dad did. I was the first in the family to be able to go to college and graduate. It had always been my dad's life ambition to be an engineer. He thought engineers were the most noble profession. They built everything. It had been a dream of his when he was in Cuba to be an engineer, and the family was poor and didn't have the resources to do that. So for him, my becoming an engineer was one of the most proud events in his life. I after that went on and became a lawyer. But everything I think about in this special time we're in, and in the equity issues that we face in the country, all go back to the feelings I had growing up in a family of immigrants. The feeling that you are part of a great country, but still not a full member of it. And I'm sad to say, like Charles, that it's bitter to know that we are at this moment in time, and these issues that we had thought would have been resolved in our childhood are still the things that we are talking about. And the injustices that we've seen over the last couple of months can still occur in this country. I'm inspired by the amount of energy that has been produced here. It's important that we recognize that as central to fairness as the Black Lives Matter movement and the fight against police misconduct that it represents, that there are other aspects to the equity discussion that we have to continue to keep a focus on. Congressman Rush talked about the importance of the energy sector in terms of creating economic opportunity, but also in dealing with things that are worldwide challenges like climate change. There are a great many new technologies and opportunities that are going to be presented. Those technologies and opportunities heretofore haven't been made available to a lot of the communities we care about. We have to, as we take the momentum from these events and the opportunity to have a broader discussion, we need to be able to juggle a lot of these issues in our minds simultaneously and understand that as important as the police misconduct issue is, in isolation, even if it were to be resolved, it doesn't resolve all of the health equity issues and the opportunity equity issues that we're talking about in the country. So we have to be able to bring these issues together, Jorge, very much as I think you have in mind for our discussion this morning, to keep the focus on all of the work that has been done and to ensure that we take the momentum from these events and we do something with it that would make all of our parents very proud if they were to observe it.
Very well. Very well. Mr. Higginbottom, would you like to also comment on sort of your early years?
I can do that, Jorge. My dad migrated to Chicago from Oxford, Mississippi. My mother was born in Illinois, down in an area called Pembroke, Illinois, which is right near Kankakee County. And it's still, at that time, it was one of the poorest townships in the state of Illinois. And I believe today it's still one of the poorest townships in the state of Illinois. They were moved to Chicago. My dad moved to Chicago. He met my mother. I was born in Cook County Hospital, which today is been revitalized and has a new rebirth and really looks good. So we moved to the south side of Chicago, and that did not suit very well with my dad, because he grew up as a peddler. He used to peddle fruits, vegetables, coal, that sort of thing by horse and wagon throughout the entire south side of Chicago. And so he thought there was a better opportunity to move back to Pembroke, which is where my mother was born. And we spent a number of years there in Pembroke. And then in seeking economic opportunities for his family, my dad moved us to Chicago Heights. He was drawing on his experience as a peddler, which made him basically an entrepreneur. He was always looking for entrepreneurial opportunities, and these more than just seeking employment. So when he moved to Chicago Heights, he opened up a small store, obviously selling fruits, vegetables, seafoods, and that sort of thing. Needless to say, at that time, capital was very difficult to raise by minorities. So we just kind of, it was, while he thought he was an entrepreneur, he was really working on a job, his own job. I was fortunate. I went on to Bloom High School there, and I had a little bit of talent, and I was recruited at the University of Wisconsin as part of their University of Wisconsin track team. Had it not been for that opportunity of a scholarship, I would not have been able to attend college. I think that the experience that I had with my parents, both my father and mother, as entrepreneurs, made me always want to gravitate to that side of the ledger. So I attended Wisconsin. And at that time, you know, they always wanted to keep the athletes busy during the summer, so they'd always get you summer jobs. And I had the opportunity to get a summer job with a company called Baird and Warner, which I was started here in 1855, and it's still around today in a little bit different form than it was back then. And because I always had an interest in real estate. I had an interest in entrepreneurship, as you can see, because of my parents. So I took a job at Baird and Warner, and that was really fortunate for me. I worked there 2 years as a summer intern, and then when I graduated from university, I got a full-time job there. And I really had an interest in trying to see what we could do to rebuild the inner city and the communities that suffered from lack of investment and lack of financial support. So I used my platform at Baird and Warner to start doing affordable housing in the inner cities of Chicago. First large affordable housing development that I did was in Lawndale, and using the Baird and Warner platform, I was able to finance that. And my mentor, John Baird, used his offices to bring equity capital to that area. And we did a number of developments like that for a number of years. And we saw the tremendous benefit that it brought to the community. It not only in better housing, but in jobs and business opportunity and that sort of thing. And I spent 18 years at Baird and Warner developing both Lawndale, Kenwood, South Shore, and that sort of thing, at a time when there was flight from the city. There was white flight from the city. People were moving out of the cities, and they had pretty much written the cities off. And so it gave us a little bit more of opportunity, and gave me a lot of gratification to see that we could do something to improve the lives of the people in the inner city and in these areas. And so I said, you know, I'd like to do a little bit more. And I decided that I wanted to open up my own firm. And I spent 20 years at Baird & Warner doing things in the inner city. And I said, I think I could even do more if I'm located in those areas, and my 100% focus is in the inner city areas. So I left them, set up my own company, East Lake Management, and started doing development in the areas. I was having trouble finding contractors and people to work in the areas because there was so much flight from the areas. So there, I had to start my own construction company to renovate and rehab the buildings that I was acquiring. And that's really how I got into the construction business. But, you know, as I looked around, I had those opportunities because of people like Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and other people, and Congressman Rush certainly, and other people who saw the injustice in our society. And what they did was they pushed the social agenda. And I said, well, listen, if they're doing the social agenda, what we need is more people to look like me to start pushing an economic agenda. And that was one of the reasons that I really focused on economics, hiring people, making better housing for people, and getting people involved in basically what I call all the real root basis of capitalism. And America is a capitalistic society. And I felt that in order for minorities to get the maximum benefit of their society, we had to have more minority capitalists, not just job holders and job seekers, but we had to have business people who were creating jobs. And then you don't have to ask other groups to employ your people, because you're employing them and you're creating jobs for them. And you're also a beacon of hope, as well as a role model for other people to look like you to begin to do that too. And I think that's how we tend to participate more in this great society that we have. And, you know, over the years, we thought that we had solved a lot of the problems, but as we can all see from recent events, that we still have a long way to go. But I think that one of the big ways that we can help solve this problem is have more minority entrepreneurs. We would have to expect that the majority companies that are well established would participate and do more business with minority entrepreneurs. And that would then create a better job base and economic opportunity for the minority community. And I think we'd have a better society as a result of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbottom. Mr. Matthews, I know you mentioned a little bit about coming up from the South, but anything more you wanted to add?
Jorge, I bailed you out. I knew the rich history of the other panelists, so I knew they would certainly have great stories to tell. I won't go back, but I will talk about the common theme that I think we've all heard, is that all of us have in common that we understood the sacrifice that people before us made for us to get the opportunities that we have today. And that's a common theme, and that's something that has driven all of us. And as we go through the additional discussion today, I think we need to ask ourselves, how do we drive that next generation? How do we drive the next generation to have the same kind of determination that the panelists have shared with the audience today? I think that's going to be critical. So I won't go back into my paths anymore. I think you heard it's very similar to everybody else. So I'll give you my time back.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Roldan?
Thank you,
everybody. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So I grew up, was born and raised and grew up in Brooklyn. Both my parents were from Aguadilla in Puerto Rico and met in New York, actually. And as a teenager, it's interesting because, we were poor, but I never sort of knew that until later on, where I sort of got exposed to a broader circle in society. I remember as a kid, I had a pair of jeans that were torn up and all of that, but I had them all the time. They were clean all the time. And I had a pair of PF Flyers, and PF Flyers were these sneakers, and I would be running around all the time, and we couldn't afford, new ones. So there would be a hole that developed in the PF Flyer, and I kept sticking cardboard in the PF Flyer, and the hole would be getting bigger, and pretty soon, my whole foot would go through, and that's when you really had to get a new pair of PF Flyers. But everybody was in the same situation, so there was no sort of economic envy that went with that. As a kid and a teenager, I led sort of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde life. On one hand, I was a street kid. On the other hand, my parents insisted that I get good grades, and so I had to do that to continue to be a street kid. And I remember at one point I was a war counselor for the baby Barracudas. We were a small gang in Brooklyn. I remember I was in charge of both making and keeping zip guns. Zip guns were guns that were made from car antennas. The articulation of antennas back in the 50s and 60s. One of the antennas would take a 22 round perfectly. And you take that and you screw around with other things, and you actually make a weapon that could be shot. Now, there's no rifling in the barrel, by the way. So if you shot it at somebody and they were like 2 feet away, you'd probably miss them. And thank God I never shot anybody. But the point is, I was in charge of the firearms, if you will, for the street gang. At the same time, I got pretty good grades, and then wound up going to college, but worked all the while. So I worked during the day for 10 years, while at night I went to school. I got 2 degrees, getting 3 credits, 6 credits, 12 credits, always knowing instinctively that having a degree was a mechanism to open doors for opportunities, potential, at least giving you the opportunity to be in front of people, to make a case for your quality and qualifications. And in fact, that's sort of how it worked out. I had many jobs growing up as a kid. I started working when I was like 11 years old. Every Christmas, summer, Easter that I could work, I would be out there, trying to make some money. And eventually, I was working, I wound up being recruited by the Army and going to Vietnam with the 1st Infantry Division. Carried an M60 machine gun around the jungle, sort of like Rambo, except I was terrified. And having survived that and getting back stateside to folks who were sort of hostile to veterans at that time, which I didn't care about very much because I had survived. So people's attitudes about my having been a veteran in Vietnam didn't affect me, but wound up getting a job with household finance, making usurious loans to mostly poor people like that, and did that for about 2.5 years. And then realized, that was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I quit that job and started driving a cab and started talking to priests, lawyers, poets, business people, anybody that would talk to me about what they were doing for a living and whether they enjoyed it or not. It seemed to me then, and this is what I tell young people all the time, it's not your net worth. It's not how much you make. It's that you have a joy in the work that you do that's important. Those who are fortunate go to quote unquote work with pleasure in our souls and hearts because we're doing something of some value. And that sort of career sweet spot is something that we should all pursue, making sure, that we do what we enjoy in life for a living. God gives us 24 hours. We sleep 8 of those. We have 16 hours of consciousness. We spend 8 to 10 of those 16 hours of consciousness doing something that we don't enjoy. It chews away at your soul. So find something that you love and do that. From Brooklyn, I wound up, getting with my second graduate degree, responded to an ad in the New York Times for doing development work, which I was doing in Brooklyn in Sunset Park, in a major Midwestern city. Didn't even say it was Chicago. So I sent in my resume. About 2 weeks later, I get called for an interview. I came for 2 or 3 interviews, got the job, came to Chicago. This was a long time ago in a covered wagon. I know this is hard to believe, but with a pregnant wife. And so I was the first employee of Hispanic housing back in January of 1976. So that's sort of the early years.
There you go. Well, thank you, Mr. Roldan. Now, we want to be respectful of everyone's time here. I know Congressman Garcia needs to leave, but I want to just, end this part of the discussion just with one question. And Congressman Garcia, if you can answer as sort of your sign off as well, we would really appreciate it. And the question comes from one of our viewers. In terms of insights on how we can expand on the current awareness of the plight of minorities and transfer that momentum onto steady and continuous economic access for growing minority businesses and economic businesses opportunities. There's a way you could comment on that, Congressman. Also, you can weave that into your closing statement too.
Absolutely. And again, it's great to join you. I apologize for having to run out, but I'm trying to make a funeral before it's over at 11, and I got to take a quick drive. Perhaps the father of Dan Marquez passed away. Dan Marquez Sr., longtime resident of Back of the Yards, a pioneer. So I'm trying to pay my respects. But let me say this. We've got some important legislation coming up in the U.S. Congress that has a lot to do with what we're talking about in the future of small businesses and many of the firms that comprise HACIAs. The HEROES Act is our fourth significant bill to deal with the pandemic and both the health as well as the economic effects of the pandemic. It provides another stimulus checks to families. It includes mixed status immigrant families who were left out of the first stimulus checks. It extends unemployment insurance benefits that are so critical, especially to minority communities and working class people. It also makes people eligible for testing, treatment, and tracing moving forward in the pandemic. There is additional support for small businesses. And then there's the all critical support for state and local governments. Both Republican and Democratic governors and mayors and many other elected officials have been lobbying the Senate to address the HEROES Act and these provisions of it. I also want to say, in terms of additional economic opportunity, the transportation and science and education and labor bill moving forward, a $1.3 trillion bill is significant in its infrastructure aims and goals. It will modernize our infrastructure across the country, whether it's water or sewer or highways or transit or the great broadband initiative, $100 billion in it. This needs to be addressed in the next 2 weeks when Congress is back. So I urge all of you to join us in advocating for that. This will be an important stimulus to small businesses across the country. It's badly needed to keep America working. So I ask for your help. I also want to end on another positive and historic note that these times are producing, and that is that next week, the House of Representatives is going to act on a bill that would move to create the National Museum of the American Latino. This is significant. This bill is the path forward to enable us to have a museum like the Native American Museum, like the African American Museum, like the Jewish museums that are in Washington, D.C. Our community has long and deep roots in this country. Before the foundation of this country, it's time that be known and shared with everyone in America. So I'm very proud that as a member of the Hispanic Caucus, which has led the way, we received the support of the Congressional Black Caucus, the Asian Pacific Caucus, and many other caucuses in Congress, something to celebrate. I'll just end with this, that the phase of history that we've entered, I think gives us a tremendous opportunity to address the history and the suffering of groups that have been oppressed and discriminated against. They include the original inhabitants of this land, the Native American community, which is fighting in unprecedented ways and has two great champions in the US Congress, and they happen to be two women, one from New Mexico and one from Kansas. Also, these times enable us to really appreciate the cruelty and the suffering that the institution of slavery and the legacy and the institutional racism that community has suffered for a long time. There will be many initiatives that will enable us to do right by that community and to ensure that they have a pathway for full participation and enjoying the prosperity in our country. Third, I think that all of these groups, including the immigrant community and women in our country, are making their mark on the US Congress as they should. And as we all strive for equality of opportunity and the recognition of all of our dignity, and to put all of our experiences into the history books of our country so that children learn that they are equal beings, that they have God-given talents that they should be able to cultivate and to share with everyone else in our society. I am very, very optimistic, even though there are many threats around us, including the pandemic, including very toxic politics, that we will prevail. I also want to finally point out that this Congress has enacted two pieces of significant immigration reform. They include the Dream and Promise Act that would help the DACA class of young people with a path forward to legalization and citizenship, plus the people with temporary protective status. It would provide the same pathway and protections. And finally, the Farm Modernization Act, which was passed by this Congress, would provide another path to legalization and citizenship for up to 2 million people who work in America's farms, essential workers, the people that provide us with our fruits and vegetables and food each and every day. This is why I remain hopeful that in the coming days, the country will band together to look out for everyone's welfare and to ensure that all of us feel that we have a place that we belong in our America. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate it very much. Always a pleasure talking with you to get your insights. We definitely look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Hasta pronto. Bye-bye.
We'll go to another question. I know I've been given word also that Mr. Dominguez from ComEd will need to be going, but just as a final question to you, sir, comes from the audience. Is ComEd working with MWBE consultants? If not, are there any plans to do so? And how can a company do business with ComEd? Who to contact? I know ComEd has done a wonderful job over the last several years, giving opportunities in design and construction to M&Ws more than ever before. And to that, you definitely need to get your kudos and your applause. But if you can answer this question and any final comments as well, Mr. Dominguez.
Sure. So we've gone through quite a transformation in our business. Last year, we did about $730 million of business with companies owned by women and people of color. Proportionally, that's about 60% of it is with businesses owned by people of color. So, to the point that Congressman Rush made earlier, again, about the importance of the energy sector in terms of driving economic development and opportunity, we have demonstrated that. I know Peoples, under Charles' leadership, has done a fabulous job as well, expanding opportunities. And Charles actually is the chairman of a group of utilities that have come together throughout the state of Illinois to really focus on these issues. All of us are making progress. We share names of contractors and vendors so that we could continue to expand the program. The answer to the question is yes, we do use those consultants. We have expanded rapidly by just knocking down some barriers. But at this point, we need to do more than just knock down barriers. We need to kind of create some competencies. So we run programs to help people understand what it's like to do business with us, the RFPs, the training, the certifications that are required. We have things like cocktail parties between majority-owned vendors and minority-owned vendors. One of the areas that we've historically been weak is in professional services, so legal services, financial services, investment services, all manner of consultants. We run a multi-billion-dollar business, so you can imagine we use all sorts of different competencies to run that business, from communications all the way through law, engineering, and other things. And we've made great progress in those areas and continue to strive to make additional progress. We have started programs where, for example, in the arena of law professionals, one of the things we deal with is very specific utility law regulation, which, for many years has not been an area where people of color or women have practiced at all. They don't understand it. It's an arcane area of the law, and it requires training. We've actually hired some former judges. So we have classrooms, we have minority firms that shadow other firms for a period of time. So they're watching the work get done for a year, and then they step in and are able to do the work. So a number of different training programs that have been incredibly successful for us. And we also learn from the great work that People's doing, NICOR is doing, Ameren is doing. One of the reasons that this group that Charles chairs is so important to us is really understanding different best practices. The way that you could reach out directly to my office, my contact information is on our website. If you're interested in doing business with ComEd, we're interested in talking with you, and we'll put you in touch with our procurement agencies. And if, for example, you need some advice on some training or other ways that we can facilitate it, we'd be glad to do it. We're always looking for new business partners. I'm glad to look at the screen and see some of our existing business partners. And I know in the audience here today, we have quite a few people that we've worked with. I think ComEd today on the electric utility side could lay claim to being, if not the best, one of the best performing utilities in America. It's no coincidence that occurs at the same time that 40% of our vendor, supplier, and services relationships are with businesses owned by women and people of color. The transformation that we've undergone is a result of the talent that those different businesses have brought to our organization and their passion. Their desire to get through the door has often led to superior performance than we've had historically. So we look forward to continuing to do that work. And Jorge, again, thank you so much for convening this forum and this great discussion. I'm sorry I'm going to have to drop off, but I wish all of you a good day and a great weekend. God bless.
Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. Thank you very much. Now, as a final question, we'll close with this question, and we'll ask the remaining panelists to chime in as you see. It's a big question of where do we go from here? We know that design and construction has given us an opportunity to really provide real meaningful impact to Hispanic and other minority firms. They hire more individuals. We don't need a big think tank like the MacArthur Foundation to tell us that Latinos and African Americans hire Latinos and African Americans. But where do we go from here? The question always comes out, is it true, or maybe this is the opportunity that we'd have a very strong Latino and African American coalition? Is it real? Is it something that we can actually coalesce around? What are your thoughts? And if you want to add a closing statement to that, we really appreciate it. We'll start off with Mr. Roldan.
Thank you, Jorge. Want to make sure I'm on. Oh, great. Yeah, no, I've been in Chicago 43 years now, and it's a fascinating place because it continues to reflect this sort of subliminal racism, and there is importantly a very fine line between racism and something called ethnocentrism. That is the belief that your people, your culture, your race has better food, history, all of those things that we value as a culture is the best. Not necessarily that you don't want somebody else, but that yours is the best. And I think that's great. That holds cultures together as they move on through history and through reality. But the fact is, that God created each and every single one of us, and for some reason or other, we're 99% the same and 1% different. And we look at the 1%. We need to spend more time sort of looking into each other's hearts, souls, motivations, values, all of that, to figure out how we can, as individuals, appreciate, understand, as Christ said, love each other. And that, it seems to me, begins to be the basis of creating business relationships moving forward. It's very, very profound, fundamental, grassroots. We need to be, I think, human beings that really understand what our nature is and our existence here on this planet, and sort of put all these other issues that sort of come at us aside to begin to coalesce with each other in a more profound way. It sounded like a preaching, but in a sense, it's that relationship building is a spiritual process.
It is.
A good point. Mr. Higginbottom, anything you'd like to add to that or get your insight on that?
I think that all of the above, and I think that what we really need to do is we need to take advantage of this particular time and try to build more minority businesses. Minority businesses need more access to capital. They need more opportunity. They need the things that the majority businesses have enjoyed over the years and that they've been foreclosed from being able to participate in. And I think that, as you can see with minority businesses that have done business with Peoples and with ComEd, those have been successful relationships. I think the problem is that there's not been enough of those opportunities available for the amount of minorities that are interested in getting businesses and interested in developing their businesses. And I think we just need to continue to explore those opportunities, have the executives at places like Peoples and Commonwealth Edison talk to executives of other major companies and tell them how their experience has been with doing business with minorities. And I think that it's important to point out throughout this thing that even though companies do business with minorities, this doesn't necessarily upset the stream of business that they have with their existing customers. I think this is one of the things that people are always afraid of. Well, don't expand and do business with anyone else, because if you do, you won't be able to do business with me. These corporations are constantly expanding, getting larger, and continually and constantly have more opportunities available. So I think we just have to be able to convince people that because you give someone else an opportunity, it does not necessarily mean that you lose an opportunity. What it can mean is that you will gain an opportunity because the business that you help develop will have opportunities that your business will be able to profit from. So I think that we just continue to work and understand, and that opportunities beget opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbottom. Mr. Matthews?
Okay, Jorge, I think we need to absolutely capture the moment. And by that, I mean, take advantage of the opportunity that's come out of the challenges that we're currently addressing. And from two perspectives. First, let me talk about the coalition. You talked about the coalition. In particular, you talked about the coalition of African Americans and Latinos Absolutely, that coalition is absolutely necessary to drive the change that we need. But the opportunity in front of us is bigger than that. And as the events have transpired over the last 2 or 3 months, what has caught me was there's a bigger coalition that's driving this movement today than the times that we talked about earlier, the times when we grew up, when everything for the most part was black or white. Well, today I see, black, brown, and white, younger generation out there leading this. So we need to take advantage and expand the coalition beyond African Americans, Latinos, and leverage this new generation of socially conscious whites that have shown in a surprising way of late that they want to be part of the solution. The other opportunity we need to take advantage of, and I'll talk about this one, deals with corporate America and big business. And in honor of my good friend Elsie, who I know is a great track guy, we got to hold corporations and businesses accountable to run through the tape, not just run a good 200-meter of a 400-meter race. And what I mean by that, if you look at a lot of the companies, they've sort of given themselves credit for a lot of activity. And Joe and I certainly, as he mentioned, we've worked together. We like our numbers. We think we've done a lot. And arguably, we could say, okay, we've done what we need to do. But every time I pick up the newspaper and I see that we still have a wealth gap issue in this country, in our communities, we still have an educational gap in our communities. We still have a healthcare gap in our communities. I cannot get a free pass, regardless of what activities I've done. Now, maybe it wasn't me that produced those bad results, or maybe I did do my part. And maybe what I need to do is hold somebody else accountable. But we have to take advantage of this moment in time when corporations have taken note that despite all of the activity and what a lot of them think or thought was significant gains over the last 20 or 30 years, when you look at the final metrics of what we should be focusing on, those 3 things I talked about, we are still failing. And I think we got their attention that whatever we've done wasn't enough and we need to do more. So I say to organizations like HACIA, continue to be an advocate for those things that help close the gap in healthcare, in wealth gap, and education. Thank you for letting me be here, and thank you for convening this panel, Jorge.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Congressman Rush?
Yes, I want to just build upon what Charles and others have said. His metaphor about running through the tape, I think is apropos, and for us, for some thoughts that I would want us to consider. The African American community was at its best when it embraces what I call its prophetic voice. We were a prophetic community that was action-oriented, activist-oriented. We went to the streets and demonstrated and had all kinds of public expressions of our discontent, our anger, our the racism that really permeated the society and permeated our lives. And then in a very righteous moment, we elected the first African American president of the United States. And I would coin that time, that transformation is that we moved from prophetic community, a prophetic people to a presidential people. When we put all of our hopes, dreams, and aspirations on the office of the presidency, where most of our waking moments were geared around protecting him and fighting off those his enemies in the Congress, including the House and the Senate and in other places. So we moved from being a prophetic people to what I call being a presidential people. Now we're in a place now where we are beginning to become returning to our more purposeful and powerful and productive place of prophecy. That means that we're in the streets again. We're taking on the challenges that are before us in all the areas of our way of life. And certainly, I want to look at the upcoming November election, because I think that is an opportunity for us to really define what the next generation, what the immediate future of this nation is going to be about, how it's going to look, what it's going to, what kind of lives Americans in the future will live. And so I think that we must have a laser beam focus on this upcoming election. And but the one thing that I believe and hope that we won't surrender is our prophetic voice. And let me be real clear here. I think that if we elect Joe Biden can be, he has a choice. He can be a transformative president, or he can be a transcendental president. Now, a transformative president really is just going to tinker around the edges. Some people will be satisfied with that, but I really embrace this thought of not running to the tape, but running through the tape. And I think that Joe Biden must be more or greater than just a transformative president. He's got to be a transcendental president, and the way that he becomes a transcendental president is by, in a very obvious, in a very determined, in a very inspiring way. He has to deal with this sense of white superiority. He's got, white superiority cannot be at the core of our worldview, our public policies, economic policies. It just can't be at the center of that. We have got to, once and for all, have some frank and honest discussion that, that white superiority in its most devious terms and its most devious policy expressions have always held minorities, people of color, always down, and always have divided or tainted the truth about the development of this nation and the development of the Western world. So we've got to, if we're going to have a real righteous coalition, then we got to come to this coalition with the understanding that we all, as was indicated earlier, we're all created in the image of God, okay? And therefore we all have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Only when we can face up to the lie that was there at the beginning of this nation will we ever achieve what Dr. King called in terms of the beloved community. Not only will we free minorities and women and others from the prison of the white lie, which is the white superiority complex. But we will free ourselves, and we will free those who have benefited from this this sense of white superiority that has permeated our society. And I think that that we must get the conversation has to be held in the white community, just as it is in the Latino community, in the Black community, the Asian community. This conversation has got to be held because, the majority of whites, even some of our very close and wonderful friends, they still have this privilege that has become a narcotic to them as a people about their superiority and what they call the American exceptionalism. Well, we got to really confront those issues, and then we got to develop policies around and programs and opportunities to disengage, disavow, and to become and to project the reality of the truth about why America is great and how America will continue to be great. And the place to start that is at the federal government. I am on the threshold of creating initiative, legislative or otherwise, about trying to force the federal government to engage in a process and a program to rid racism, institutional racism, out of the departments and the agencies of the federal government. Until we are able to use the federal government as a giant laboratory, as a great laboratory for social and economic justice, then we are just again we'll mean transformative and not transcendental. So the federal government is the place where the racism was founded, was embedded. It's the institution that promotes racism, even in present day activities, present day pursuits, even in our contemporary times. It is the one institution that needs to do more than it has been, and do more than even it can imagine it can do in terms of ridding this nation of institutional racism. Racial housing policy, economic policy, even the institution of slavery itself was promoted and protected by activities that emanated from the federal government. Until we rid the federal government of the racism that is profound and promoted and that is indicative of the racism of the nation, until we rid the federal government of its racist policy, then we can't expect anybody else. The federal government has to do what it says it's going to do. It's got to, it's got to be the light that shines over the entire nation, and the federal government has got to move from do as I say, but not as I do. And I think this is a great opportunity, and Joe Biden has this opportunity to move our nation forward and rid, particularly the white community, of its narcotized state of white privilege.
Thank you, Congressman. Really appreciate that. Well, I know we've gone a little bit over our time, and that brings us to the end of our program for this morning. I would like to thank our panelists for joining us and providing a wonderful insight and reflection on the current events in this historic time. I would like to remind everyone that we plan on having other webinars and producing some videos here in our new studios, and that we'll be releasing those in the coming weeks. Please feel free to contact us with any feedback that you have, positive or negative. We always want to make ourselves better. And we want to let you know that this recording will be available, and we will be working on a recording of a HACIA tonight to recap the previous month's events in regards to design and construction and other opportunities that may be affecting our members or our members could take advantage of. Now, I do want to help us close here by mentioning and thanking again our sponsors who've supported this event for this morning, our distinguished panelists, and I also want to thank our board of directors for their support. In closing, I'm Jorge Perez. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a wonderful day and stay safe.